The moment Ilara placed the last piece of her bread into the filthy hand of the dying beggar, she felt something snap inside her chest. A golden thread she didn't know existed, pulling taut, binding her soul to a stranger whose eyes suddenly blazed with molten gold. But that moment hadn't happened yet. 3 hours earlier, Ilara Vance was on her knees scrubbing the kitchen floor of Thornwood Manor. Her fingers cracked and bleeding from the lye soap, her stomach cramped with a hunger so familiar it had become part of her bones. She was 20 years old and had been invisible her entire life. Orphaned at 7, sold to Baron Thornwood's household at 8, she had spent 12 years learning the art of becoming nothing. How to move through hallways without making a sound. How to keep her eyes down when the Baron's son walked past. How to survive on the scraps the cook threw to the pigs, fighting them for moldy crusts when no one was looking. In Ashwood Village, she was less than nothing. A peasant without a family, without a pack, without a single person who would notice if she disappeared tomorrow. The wolves who lived in the grand houses and walked through the market in their fine clothes looked through her as though she were made of glass. Maybe she was. Sometimes she felt that transparent, that breakable. "Girl," the cook's sharp voice cracked through the kitchen. "Baron wants fresh wood for his study fire. Now." Ilara rose on aching legs and didn't bother to answer. Answers invited attention. Attention invited pain. She gathered the wood from the pile outside the kitchen door, her thin dress offering nothing against the brutal winter wind. Snow had been falling for 3 days straight, and the drifts were waist-high in places. Ashwood Village huddled beneath the white silence like a frightened animal, and even the wolves stayed inside their warm homes. Ilara had no warm home. She had a pile of straw in the corner of the kitchen, near enough to the dying fire to keep from freezing. She had the single piece of bread hidden in her apron pocket, the one she'd stolen from the Baron's table when no one was looking. That bread was supposed to last her 2 days. The cook had made it clear that Ilara wouldn't be eating from the household stores after she dropped a serving platter last week. 2 days of punishment, 2 days of nothing. But Ilara had plans for that bread. The same plans she always had. After her chores were done and the household had retired, she slipped out through the servants' entrance and made her way toward the forest edge. The snow soaked through her thin shoes immediately, numbing her feet, but she kept walking. This was her ritual, her one small rebellion against a world that had given her nothing. At the tree line, she would break her bread into pieces and scatter them for the wild animals, the rabbits and foxes and birds who, like her, were just trying to survive another winter. It was foolish, wasteful. If the cook ever found out, Ilara would be beaten bloody. But for those few minutes, watching the creatures emerge from the shadows to take what she offered, Ilara felt like she existed, like she mattered to something, even if it was just a starving rabbit. Tonight, however, something was different. She smelled the blood before she saw him. It cut through the clean winter air like a blade, metallic and wrong and overwhelming. Ilara froze at the edge of the trees, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run. These were dangerous times. The Alpha King had gone missing 3 months ago after an assassination attempt, and the kingdom had been chaos ever since. Rival packs circled like vultures, rogues prowled the borders, travelers disappeared on the roads between villages, and their bodies were sometimes found torn apart in the snow. Smart wolves stayed inside after dark. Smart wolves didn't investigate strange smells in the forest. But Ilara had never had the luxury of being smart, only lucky, and her luck had been running thin for years. She crept forward and found him. The man was collapsed against a fallen log, half buried in snow. His clothes were rags, torn and soaked with blood that had frozen to the fabric in dark, ugly patches. His face was pale as death, his lips blue, his breathing so shallow she had to watch for a long moment to be sure he was breathing at all. He looked like a beggar. the kind of desperate, broken creature that wandered the roads begging for scraps, dying by inches from cold and hunger and wounds that never healed. Ashwood Village was full of them since the troubles started. They appeared, they suffered, and eventually they disappeared, and no one spoke their names. Elara should have walked away. She knew that. A strange man covered in wounds, reeking of blood. He could be anyone. A rogue, a criminal, a monster wearing human skin. But his breathing, God, his breathing was so labored. Each inhale a wet rattle that spoke of broken ribs and punctured lungs, and his hands, curled against his chest, were shaking even in unconsciousness. He was dying, right here, right now, while she stood and watched. "Damn it," she whispered, the curse feeling foreign on her tongue. She'd learned early not to speak unless spoken to, but there was no one here to punish her for it. She knelt in the snow beside him, pulling out her precious bread, her one meal, her only food for the next 2 days. The smart thing, the sensible thing, was to keep walking, to go back to the manor and her pile of straw and try to sleep through her hunger until the cook's punishment ended. What was one dying stranger compared to her own survival? But Elara looked at his face, at the lines of pain carved around his mouth, even in unconsciousness. And she thought about all the times she had been hurt and alone and desperate, all the times she had prayed for someone, anyone, to show her a moment of kindness. No one ever had. Maybe that was why she had to be different. "Hey," she said softly, reaching out to touch his shoulder. "Hey, can you hear me?" His eyes flew open. For one impossible second, they blazed with molten gold, the unmistakable, terrifying gold of an alpha wolf. Power rolled off him in waves that pressed against her skin like heat from a furnace, and Elara felt something inside her chest snap. A thread, a golden thread she hadn't known existed, suddenly pulled taut, stretching from her heart to his, binding her soul to this stranger in a way she couldn't understand and couldn't break. Mate. The word echoed through her mind, though she'd never heard it before. Never felt anything like this before. The gold faded from his eyes as quickly as it had appeared, leaving them a deep, exhausted brown. He looked at her, really looked at her, and his cracked lips parted. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "Neither should you." Elara pressed the bread into his filthy hand, curling his frozen fingers around it. "Eat this. You need it more than I do." He stared at the bread like she'd handed him a diamond. Then he stared at her, and something flickered in his eyes that she couldn't name. Wonder, maybe, or disbelief. "Why?" he whispered. Elara didn't have an answer. She didn't know why. She only knew that walking away wasn't an option anymore. "Because someone should," she said simply. She didn't see Marcus Thornwood until his hand closed around her hair and yanked her backward into the snow. Well. The Baron's son stood over her, his handsome face twisted with cruel pleasure. 2 of his friends flanked him, their teeth gleaming in the moonlight. "The kitchen rat sneaking food to strangers. Father will be very interested to hear about this." "Please," Elara started. Marcus's boot connected with her ribs, and the world exploded in white-hot pain. "Thieves don't get to beg," he said pleasantly. "They get sold. The slave traders will pay good coin for a pretty little thing like you at the next moon market." He grabbed her arm and hauled her upright, and Elara caught one last glimpse of the beggar through her tears. He was still lying in the snow, unmoving, watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes. She had saved him, or tried to, and now she was going to pay for it with everything she had left. Marcus dragged her back through the snow toward the manor, and she didn't fight. Fighting only made things worse. She had learned that lesson long ago. Behind her, in the darkness of the forest, the dying beggar rose to his feet. His wounds were healing, bone and flesh and skin knitting together with impossible speed, 3 months of damage erasing in minutes. His shoulders straightened, His spine went rigid, and his eyes, when they opened again, were pure molten gold. He watched the girl being dragged away. His mate, his perfect, beautiful, brave little mate, who had given him her last piece of bread when she had nothing, and his lips curled into a dangerous smile. "Found you," he murmured. "Found you, little mate." The howl split the night like a blade. Every wolf in Ashwood Village felt it. From the Baron in his study to the lowest servant in the kitchen, power older than memory, stronger than fear, rippled through the territory in waves that drove them all to their knees. Marcus Thornwood dropped Alara in the middle of the courtyard as his body betrayed him, his legs folding, his head bowing against his will. "No," he gasped. "No, it can't be." But it was. The Alpha King, missing for 3 months after an assassination attempt, presumed dead by half the kingdom, had returned, and his power was reaching across the miles, demanding submission from every wolf who bore the mark of his rule. In the forest edge, a figure straightened, no longer a beggar, no longer broken. King Caden Blackwood adjusted the ragged clothes that hung from his newly healed body and began to walk toward Thornwood Manor. His mate was waiting. And the wolves who had dared to touch her were about to learn what it meant to threaten the Alpha King's chosen. Chapter 2. The cellar was cold enough to freeze tears before they could fall. Alara had stopped crying hours ago. There wasn't any point to it. Tears didn't unlock doors. Tears didn't undo the mistakes that had led her here, shivering on a dirt floor in the darkness beneath Thornwood Manor, waiting to be sold like livestock at the moon market. She had made peace with it, or something close to peace. Her whole life had been building to this moment, hadn't it? 20 years of being nothing, of having nothing, of mattering to no one. At least the slave traders would feed her. At least she would be useful to someone, even if that usefulness came at a terrible price. But she couldn't stop thinking about his eyes, golden, blazing, impossible. Alpha gold didn't belong in the eyes of dying beggars. Alpha gold belonged to kings and pack leaders, to wolves so powerful they could command armies with a single howl. She had seen the Baron's eyes shift to amber once, when he was particularly angry, but amber was nothing compared to what she had witnessed in that forest. And the thread, that strange, impossible thread that had snapped into existence the moment their hands touched, stretching between her heart and his like a rope made of sunlight. She didn't understand it. She didn't have the education or the experience to name what had happened to her. All she knew was that somewhere out there, a man with golden eyes was carrying a piece of her soul, and she would probably never see him again. Maybe it was better that way. Maybe. The cellar door exploded inward. Alara scrambled backward, pressing herself against the damp stone wall as torchlight flooded the darkness. 2 guards thundered down the stairs, their faces pale, their hands shaking. "Get up!" one of them barked. "The Baron wants you in the Great Hall, now!" "Why?" The word escaped before she could stop it. The guard's face twisted with something that looked almost like fear. "The Alpha King is here." The Great Hall of Thornwood Manor had never looked so small. Alara had scrubbed these floors 1,000 times. She had served wine at 100 of the Baron's tedious dinners, invisible in her worn gray dress, eyes down, voice silent. She knew every stone in the fireplace, every thread in the tapestries, every crack in the ancient wooden beams. But today, the room felt like a cage, and the wolves inside it felt like prey. Baron Thornwood stood near the hearth, his face the color of old ash. His hands trembled at his sides. Marcus stood beside him, and for the first time in her life, Alara saw real terror in the young man's eyes. The royal guard lined the walls, 12 of them, massive wolves in black leather armor, their faces hard as granite. They moved like predators, every shift of their bodies precise and deadly. The Baron's own guards had been disarmed and pushed to the corners of the room like children. and in the center of it all, standing with his back to her, was the king. She knew him before she saw his face. She felt him, that golden thread in her chest pulling taut, singing with recognition. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Her hands began to shake. "Your Majesty," Baron Thornwood was saying, his voice thin and reedy, "we had heard, that is, we believed, the reports of your death were greatly exaggerated." The king's voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder, deep, commanding, nothing like the broken rasp of the beggar she had knelt beside in the snow. "Though I'm touched by your concern, Baron, truly." "Of course, Your Majesty, of course. We mourned. We all mourned." "I'm sure you did." The guard behind Alara shoved her forward. "The servant you requested, Your Majesty, to serve the wine." Alara stumbled, catching herself before she fell. Her fingers closed around the handle of the wine pitcher that someone pressed into her hands. She kept her eyes on the floor, the way she had been trained, and began to move toward the table. 1 step, 2, 3. "Look at me." The command crackled through the air like lightning. Alara's head snapped up before she could stop it, her body responding to that voice in ways her mind couldn't control. And there he was. The beggar from the forest stood before her in black leather armor that fit his broad shoulders like a second skin. A crown of iron thorns rested on his dark hair. His face was clean now, the dirt and blood washed away, revealing sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could have been carved from stone. He was beautiful, terrifyingly, impossibly beautiful. The kind of beautiful that belonged in legends, not in the great hall of a minor noble's crumbling manor. But it was his eyes that destroyed her. Golden. Still golden. Burning with a fire that seemed to reach across the room and wrap around her soul. The pitcher slipped from her fingers. Wine splashed across the stone floor in a crimson wave, splattering the hem of her dress, pooling around her feet like blood. The sound of shattering ceramic echoed through the silent hall. "You clumsy little—" Marcus lunged forward, his hand closing around her arm with bruising force. He threw her to the ground and her knees cracked against the stone. "Worthless, stupid creature. Do you have any idea what you've done? That wine was worth more than your life. Remove your hand." The words were quiet, almost gentle, but the power behind them made the walls shake. Marcus froze. His face went white. Slowly, as if moving through water, he released Alara's arm and stepped backward. The Alpha King crossed the room in 3 strides. He stood over Alara, blocking out the torchlight. And for one terrible moment, she thought he was going to kill her. Instead, he extended his hand. "Get up," he said softly, so softly that no one else could hear. "You're done kneeling to these people." Alara stared at his hand, at the same hand she had pressed bread into just hours ago, at the same fingers that had curled around hers in the snow, trembling and desperate. She took it. His skin was warm now, warm and strong and alive. He pulled her to her feet as if she weighed nothing, and the moment their palms touched, that golden thread blazed to life between them, flooding her chest with heat. She saw his jaw tighten, saw his eyes flash brighter for just an instant. He felt it too. Whatever this was, he felt it too. But when he spoke, his voice was ice. "Baron Thornwood." He released Alara's hand and turned to face the trembling noble. "I find myself in need of additional servants for the palace. The assassination attempt left my household diminished. I'll be requisitioning your entire staff." The Baron's mouth opened and closed like a fish. All of them? Your Majesty, surely. All of them." The king's gaze swept the room, lingering for just a moment on Marcus's pale face. "Including this one. She seems capable enough when she's not being thrown to the ground by spoiled children." Marcus flinched as if he'd been struck. "They will be compensated, of course," the king continued, his tone bored. "I'm not a thief, unlike some." His eyes met Marcus's, and something dark and dangerous flickered in their golden depths. "I've heard interesting rumors about your moon market activities, young Thornwood, selling servants who haven't committed any crime. Perhaps we should discuss that further, at the palace, under formal investigation." Marcus looked like he was going to vomit. "That won't be necessary," Baron Thornwood said quickly, desperately. "Take them. Take all the servants you need. We are loyal to the crown, Your Majesty, always loyal." "Of course you are." The king smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "Have them ready to travel within the hour. We leave at midday." The royal convoy stretched across the snow-covered road like a black serpent. Alara sat in one of the covered wagons with 6 other servants from the manor, all of them too terrified to speak. The cook had been crying since they left. The stable boy was praying under his breath. Even the housekeeper, who had never shown Alara an ounce of kindness, looked small and scared. Alara should have been frightened too. She was being taken from everything she knew, carried off to the seat of power in the realm, where she knew no one and had no protection. The Alpha King had saved her from Marcus, but that didn't mean she was safe. It just meant she had a new master. But every time she tried to summon fear, she felt that golden thread instead, warm and steady in her chest, pointing toward the front of the convoy where the king rode with his guard. Mate. The word kept echoing through her mind. She didn't know what it meant. She had heard whispers, of course. Wolves found their fated mates, the other half of their souls, and the bond between them was unbreakable. But that was a fairy tale. Something that happened to nobles and royals, not to wolfless peasant girls who scrubbed floors for a living. She wasn't even sure she was a wolf. Her eyes had never shifted. Her teeth had never sharpened. Whatever beast was supposed to live inside her had never stirred, not once in 20 years. The other servants had called her defective, broken, an embarrassment to whatever pack had abandoned her as a child. So how could she possibly be mated to a king? Shouldn't be bringing her at all. The whisper came from outside the wagon. Alara stiffened, straining to hear. 2 guards were riding alongside, their voices low but not low enough. "Orders are orders," one of them muttered. "His Majesty wants her at the palace. She goes to the palace." But why? Some random peasant girl from a backwater village? It doesn't make sense. Unless what? A pause, then quieter. The poison came from the palace kitchens. Whoever wanted him dead is still in the inner circle. 3 months he's been hunting them, traveling in disguise, and he hasn't found them yet. Now he's bringing this girl back with him, giving his enemies a perfect target. Shut up. You want someone to hear you? I'm just saying. The Luna Council is going to tear her apart. A wolfless servant girl in the royal household? They'll destroy her before the first moon rises. The voices faded as the guards rode ahead. Alara's hands were trembling. She pressed them flat against her thighs, willing them to still. Poison. Assassination. The inner circle. She thought of the beggar in the snow, his body broken and bleeding, his wounds festering with what she now realized must have been something far worse than ordinary injury. Someone had tried to kill him, someone close to him, and that someone was still at the palace. And she was being carried straight into the heart of it. The Black Moon Palace rose from the mountains like a monster carved from stone. Alara had never seen anything so large, so terrifying. Towers clawed at the gray sky like fingers reaching for the heavens. Walls of black granite stretched for miles, broken only by iron gates that groaned open as the convoy approached. Torches burned in brackets along the battlements, casting flickering shadows across the snow. This wasn't a palace. This was a fortress, a stronghold built for war, for blood, for the kind of power that crushed peasant girls without noticing. The wagon rolled through the gates, and Alara felt the weight of the place settle over her like a shroud. "Out!" a guard commanded. "All of you, line up in the courtyard." Alara climbed down on shaking legs. The cold hit her immediately, sharper here than it had been in Ashwood, and she wrapped her thin arms around herself as she took her place among the other servants. The king was already gone. She had seen him ride through an inner gate, surrounded by his guard, disappearing into the depths of the palace without a backward glance. The golden thread stretched and pulled in her chest, but it didn't break. Nothing to me, she reminded herself. I'm nothing to him. Whatever happened in that forest, it didn't mean... So these are the new servants from Thornwood. The voice was honey and poison, sweet and sharp all at once. A woman descended the palace steps, her silver hair cascading over her shoulders like moonlight, her gown a deep burgundy that hugged her perfect figure. She was the most beautiful creature Alara had ever seen. High cheekbones, lips like rose petals, eyes the color of winter ice, and on her throat a necklace bearing the royal crest. She stopped in front of Alara, those cold eyes traveling from her dirty dress to her tangled hair to her cracked, bleeding hands. My. The woman smiled, and it was the smile of a wolf who had spotted easy prey. His Majesty certainly has interesting taste. Alara said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was safer than words. I am Lady Seraphina, the woman continued, her voice carrying across the courtyard for everyone to hear. The king's betrothed. Welcome to the Black Moon Palace. The golden thread in Alara's chest went cold. Betrothed. The word echoed through her mind, shattering something she hadn't even known she was holding. Lady Seraphina's smile widened, sharp as a blade. I do hope we'll be friends. Chapter 3. The Black Moon Palace had 1,000 rooms, and Alara learned to hate every single one of them. In the 3 weeks since her arrival, she had scrubbed floors until her knees bled. She had hauled water up endless flights of stairs. She had cleaned chamber pots and washed linens and peeled mountains of potatoes in the massive palace kitchen. Her fingers pruned and aching, her back screaming with exhaustion. It was worse than Thornwood Manor, so much worse. At least at Thornwood she had been invisible. Here she was a target. You missed a spot. Lady Seraphina's voice cut through the kitchen like a whip. Alara looked up from the pot she was scrubbing to find the silver-haired woman standing in the doorway, her burgundy gown immaculate, her ice-blue eyes sharp with malice. My lady, Alara kept her voice neutral, empty. She had learned that game long ago. The floor, near the hearth, there's a stain. Seraphina smiled her poisonous smile. Clean it, on your hands and knees, and when you're done, you can start on my chambers. The linens need changing, the silver needs polishing, and the fireplace hasn't been swept in days. Yes, my lady. Alara didn't point out that she had already scrubbed that floor twice today. She didn't mention that she hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, or that she had been awake for nearly 20 hours. Complaints invited punishment. Seraphina had taught her that lesson on the very first day. The burn on Alara's forearm still hadn't healed. Silver, Seraphina had claimed. An accident. She had been showing Alara the proper way to polish the ceremonial candlesticks, and her hand had simply slipped, pressing the silver-coated cloth against Alara's bare skin. The scream that had torn from Alara's throat had surprised them both. Silver didn't burn humans. It only burned wolves. And Alara wasn't supposed to be a wolf at all. But the wound had blistered and wept for days, and even now it throbbed with a dull, constant pain that made her want to claw her own skin off. Something was wrong with her. Something was changing. She didn't understand it. She didn't want to understand it. She just wanted to survive. The dreams had started the second night. Alara would close her eyes on her thin pallet in the servants' quarters, exhausted beyond measure, and find herself somewhere else entirely. A forest older than time, with trees so tall their branches blocked out the stars, snow beneath her feet, no, her paws. She was running on 4 legs, her body powerful and swift, her senses alive with 1,000 scents she couldn't name. And beside her, Keeping pace was another wolf. He was massive, black as midnight, with eyes that blazed like molten gold. He ran with her through the ancient trees, and she felt no fear, only joy, only a fierce, wild freedom she had never known in her waking life. Sometimes he would stop and turn to look at her, and she would catch a glimpse of her own reflection in his golden eyes. A white wolf, small but fierce, with silver eyes that glowed like moonlight. "You're waking up," he would say, though his mouth never moved. "Finally, little mate, you're waking up." Then she would jolt awake in the darkness, her heart pounding, her skin slick with sweat, and the dreams would scatter like smoke. She didn't know what they meant. She didn't know why her body felt different now, stronger somehow despite the exhaustion. Why her senses seemed sharper, her hearing more acute. Why she could smell the other servants' emotions, fear and resentment and despair, as clearly as she could smell the bread baking in the kitchen ovens. Something inside her was stirring, something that had been asleep for 20 years, and it terrified her. She saw him on the 12th night. Elara had been sent to scrub the grand staircase, a punishment for some imagined offense that Serafina hadn't bothered to explain. It was well past midnight, and the palace was silent except for the distant footsteps of the night guards. She was on her hands and knees, working her brush against the marble when she felt it. The thread, that golden thread in her chest, suddenly blazing to life, pulling taut with recognition. She looked up. He stood on the balcony above her, half hidden in shadow. The Alpha King, Kyle Blackwood. The beggar she had saved in the snow, transformed into the most powerful wolf in the realm. He was watching her, not with the cold indifference of a king observing a servant, not with the casual cruelty she had come to expect from nobles. He was watching her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, like he was memorizing every line of her face, every strand of her tangled hair, every bruise and burn that marked her skin. His eyes were gold, bright, burning gold, the same color as the wolf in her dreams. Ilara's heart stopped, then started again, pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. She should have looked away. She should have dropped her gaze and gone back to scrubbing and pretended she hadn't seen him at all. That was what servants did. That was what survivors did. But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at him while that golden thread sang between them, flooding her chest with warmth and longing and a desperate, impossible hope. "Say something," she thought. "Please, just say something. Tell me I'm not imagining this. Tell me I'm not losing my mind." He opened his mouth, then he closed it. His jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists at his sides, and he turned away. Elara watched him disappear into the shadows of the palace, and something inside her shattered into 1,000 pieces. She cried that night. For the first time since the cellar at Thornwood Manor, she let herself cry. It was stupid, foolish. He was a king, and she was nothing. He was engaged to the most beautiful woman in the realm, promised to her in a political alliance that would unite two of the most powerful packs in the kingdom. What had she expected? That he would sweep down from his balcony and declare his love for a kitchen maid? Fairy tales, childish fantasies. She was too old and too tired for dreams. But the Bond didn't care about politics. The Bond didn't care about alliances or titles or the vast, unbridgeable distance between a king and a peasant. The Bond just pulled and pulled, a constant ache in her chest, demanding something she could never have. She was falling in love with him, despite everything, despite the impossibility of it, despite the woman he was going to marry, despite the fact that he wouldn't even speak to her. She was falling in love with the Alpha King, and it was going to destroy her. The letter changed everything. It was 3 days before the mating ceremony, and Elara had been assigned to the laundry. Mountains of silk and satin and velvet, all belonging to Lady Seraphina, all needing to be washed and pressed and returned to her chambers before sunset. Alara worked mechanically, her mind elsewhere, her hands moving through the familiar motions without conscious thought. She had gotten good at that, separating her body from her mind, floating somewhere above the pain and exhaustion and heartbreak. She almost missed it. A piece of paper, folded small and tight, tucked into the pocket of one of Seraphina's dressing gowns. Alara's fingers brushed against it as she was checking for stains, and something made her pause. Later, she wouldn't be able to explain why she opened it. Servants who read their master's correspondence were punished severely, beaten, sometimes killed. It was the worst kind of violation, the deepest betrayal of trust. But something whispered in her ear, a voice that sounded like wind through ancient trees, like the howl of a wolf in the night. "Look, you need to see." She unfolded the paper. The handwriting was elegant and precise, each letter perfectly formed. Seraphina's handwriting. Alara had seen it on enough lists and instructions to recognize it instantly. The words made her blood turn to ice. The ceremony proceeds as planned. The wolf's bane will be administered through the ceremonial wine, masked by the sacred herbs. By the time the bond is sealed, the poison will have reached his heart. The dosage has been tripled since the last attempt. There will be no survival this time. Ensure the kitchen staff is cleared. No witnesses. The Silvercrest wolves will secure the palace immediately after. Our allies in the council will handle the succession. The Alpha King dies at midnight. The throne will be ours by dawn. Alara's hands were shaking so badly that she nearly dropped the letter. Seraphina, Lady Seraphina with her silver hair and her ice blue eyes and her poisonous smile. She was the traitor. She had been the one to poison Kale 3 months ago, the one who had nearly killed him, the one who had sent him fleeing into the wilderness to die alone in the snow. And she was going to try again, at the mating ceremony, in 3 days. Alara had to warn him. She had to find Kyle and show him the letter and make him understand that the woman he was about to bind himself to was planning to murder him. She stuffed the letter into her apron pocket and turned toward the door. The bag came over her head before she could scream. Strong hands grabbed her arms, yanking them behind her back. She struggled, kicking and twisting, but there were too many of them. 2, 3, she couldn't tell. And they were wolves. Real wolves, with strength that made her own feel like nothing at all. "Hold her still," a cold voice commanded. A voice she didn't recognize. "The Alpha King's little pet has seen too much." "What do we do with her?" Another voice, nervous and thin. "Take her to the silver mines. Chain her in the deep tunnels where no one will ever find her." A pause, heavy with malice. "Let her rot." Something hit the back of her head, hard, brutal, blinding. The world exploded into darkness, and Alara's last thought, before unconsciousness claimed her, was of golden eyes watching her from a balcony. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't save you." Then there was nothing at all. Chapter 4. Pain was the first thing Alara knew when she woke. It crawled through her veins like liquid fire, burning from the inside out. Every breath felt like inhaling broken glass. Her skin was on fire, her bones were on fire, her very blood was on fire, and she couldn't make it stop. She opened her eyes to absolute darkness, not the darkness of night, where stars and moon offered some small comfort. This was the darkness of deep earth, of stone pressing in from all sides, of a tomb meant for the living. The air was thick and heavy, tasting of metal and rot and something else, something that made her wolf, that strange new presence inside her, howl in silent agony. Silver. The mines. She was in the silver mines. Memory crashed back like a wave. The letter. Seraphina's treachery. The bag over her head, the hands grabbing her, the cold voice ordering her death. Take her to the silver mines. Let her rot. Alara tried to move and discovered her wrists were chained. Heavy iron manacles, bolted to the stone wall behind her. She pulled against them, felt the metal bite into her skin, and bit back a scream. "Don't struggle!" The voice came from somewhere to her left, hoarse and broken. "The chains have silver woven through them. The more you fight, the faster the poison spreads." Alara went still. "Who's there?" A dry, rattling laugh. "Just another ghost waiting to die. Same as you." Her eyes were adjusting to the darkness now, or maybe that new thing inside her was helping her see. She could make out shapes in the blackness, bodies slumped against the walls, some moving, some terribly still. The chamber was larger than she'd thought, carved deep into the mountain, with tunnels branching off in every direction. And everywhere, that silver taste in the air, that burning poison seeping into her lungs with every breath. "How long?" she asked. "How long do we have?" "Days. A week if you're strong." The voice paused. "Most aren't strong." Alara closed her eyes and tried to think past the pain. The letter was gone. They must have taken it from her. Kyle didn't know. He didn't know that Serafina was planning to kill him at the mating ceremony. Didn't know that his betrothed was the traitor he'd been hunting for 3 months. The ceremony was in 3 days. She had to get out. She had to warn him. She had to. A figure crawled toward her through the darkness. He was barely recognizable as a man, thin to the point of emaciation, his skin gray and papery, his eyes sunken deep into his skull. But those eyes, they burned with a fierce, feral light that made Alara's breath catch. "You," he rasped. "Let me see you." He reached out a skeletal hand and grabbed her chin, turning her face toward what little light filtered down from somewhere far above. His nostrils flared. His eyes went wide. "Impossible," he breathed. "It's impossible." "What? What's impossible?" "Your scent." His grip tightened, almost painful. "You smell like the old bloodlines. Like the wolves who ruled before the Blackwoods. Like—" He broke off, shaking his head. "No, they were all killed. Every last one." "I don't understand." "The Moonborn." The word fell from his lips like a prayer. The White Wolves, the original royal line. They ruled these lands for 1,000 years before the Blackwoods rose to power. The histories say they were exterminated, hunted down and slaughtered, their bloodline erased from existence. Alara stared at him. "You're mad. The silver has driven you mad." "Maybe." He released her chin and sat back on his heels. "My name is Thorn. I've been in these mines for 6 years. I've watched hundreds of wolves die in the darkness, breathing silver until their lungs gave out. I know death. I know despair. I know madness." His eyes met hers. "And I know what I smell." "You carry the Moonborn blood in your veins, girl. Whatever they told you about being wolfless, whatever you believed about yourself, it was a lie." The pain flared again, sharper this time, and Alara gasped. Inside her chest, something was fighting to get out, something that had been caged for 20 years, drugged into silence, buried so deep she hadn't even known it existed. Her wolf. "It's waking up," Thorn said, watching her with those feral eyes. "The bond you carry, it's breaking through whatever was suppressing your beast. I can feel it from here. A mate bond, a strong one." He tilted his head. "Who claimed you, Moonborn? What wolf was powerful enough to wake your blood after all these years?" Alara didn't answer. She couldn't. The pain was too great, the fire too intense. She threw her head back and screamed as something inside her began to tear itself free. 300 miles away, the Alpha King was painting the snow red. Kyle had stopped thinking hours ago. There was nothing left of the man, nothing left of the king. There was only the wolf, massive and black and utterly consumed by rage, and the bond that pulled him eastward like a chain around his heart. She was dying. He could feel it. The silver was killing her, burning through her blood, and every second that passed was another second closer to losing her forever. He had torn through the palace like a hurricane when he discovered she was missing. Servants had fled screaming. Guards had thrown themselves out of his path. He had found the wolves who had taken her within an hour, Serafina's wolves, wearing her colors, carrying her orders, and he had ripped them apart with his bare hands. They had talked before they died. They always talked. The silver mines. Ashvale. Lady Serafina's orders. Serafina. The name burned in his mind like a brand. The woman he had been promised to since childhood, the alliance that was supposed to unite two great houses, the political necessity that had kept him from claiming his true mate the moment he'd found her. She had tried to kill him once. She had nearly succeeded. 3 months of agony, 3 months of hiding and healing and hunting, and all along she had been waiting for him at the palace with poison in one hand and a smile on the other. And now she had taken Alara, his mate, his heart, his everything. Cale ran faster, his massive paws eating up the miles, his black fur slicked with blood that wasn't his own. Behind him, he could hear his beta struggling to keep pace, shouting words that the wind tore away before they could reach him. He didn't care. Nothing mattered except reaching her. Nothing mattered except Cale. The mental voice slammed into him with enough force to make him stumble. His beta, Ronan, using the pack link to bypass the king's madness. You have to listen to me. The bond, it's killing you. The separation, the rage, the feral shift, you're losing yourself. If you don't complete the bond soon, you'll become a mindless beast. You'll lose your throne. You'll lose everything. Cale snarled and kept running. I know. His mental voice was barely coherent, more wolf than man. She's dying. I can feel her dying. Nothing else matters. Serafina is waiting for you. Ronan's voice was desperate now. She anticipated this. She knew you would come. The scouts report an army of silver-crest wolves surrounding the mines. They have silver chains, Kyle. Silver arrows. They're ready for you. Let them try. He burst through the tree line, and there it was. The Ashvale mines, a gaping wound in the side of the mountain, spilling silver poison into the air. The smell hit him like a physical blow, and for one terrible moment his legs buckled. But the bond pulled him forward, always forward. He could see them now. The Silvercrest wolves, 100 strong, forming a wall around the mine entrance. And at their center, silver hair gleaming in the moonlight, stood Serafina. She was smiling. "Hello, my king," she called out. "I've been expecting you." The pain stopped. One moment, Alara was drowning in fire, her body tearing itself apart from the inside. The next, everything went quiet, calm, still. She opened her eyes and the darkness was gone. She was standing in the ancient forest from her dreams. The trees towered above her, their branches heavy with snow. The moon hung full and bright in a sky scattered with stars. And beside her, watching with eyes like liquid gold, stood the black wolf. "You're dying," he said. "The silver is destroying your body. You have minutes left." Alara looked down at herself. She was still human here, still small and fragile, still the powerless peasant girl everyone believed her to be. "I know," she said. "You don't have to." She looked at the black wolf, at Kyle, because she understood now that this was him, his spirit, his wolf, reaching out to her across the miles. "Your beast is awake," he continued. "She's been trapped inside you for 20 years, suppressed by whatever magic was used to hide your bloodline. But she's free now. She's fighting to get out. If you let her, if you surrender to the shift, the transformation will burn the silver from your blood. I don't know how. Yes, you do." He stepped closer, pressing his massive head against her chest. "You've always known. You just have to stop being afraid." Alara closed her eyes. She thought of her life. 20 years of suffering, of invisibility, of being told she was nothing, worthless, defective. 20 years of believing the lie. But she wasn't nothing. She had never been nothing. She was moonborn. the last of an ancient bloodline, a white wolf, born of silver and starlight and the old magic that had ruled these lands for 1,000 years. And she was done being afraid. "Let go," Kale whispered. "Let go, little mate. Become what you were always meant to be." Alara let go. The shift hit her like lightning. Her human body shattered, bones breaking and reforming, muscles tearing and rebuilding, skin splitting to make way for fur. She screamed, but the scream became a howl, a sound so pure and powerful that it shook the walls of the mine and sent silver dust raining from the ceiling. The chains that bound her wrists snapped like paper. The prisoners around her scrambled backward, terror and awe warring in their faces. Thorn stared at her with tears streaming down his gray cheeks. "Moonborn," he breathed. "The white wolf returns." Alara stood on 4 legs for the first time in her life. Her body was different now. Smaller than she'd expected, but dense with muscle, built for speed and agility, rather than brute strength. Her fur was white, pure white, gleaming like fresh snow even in the darkness of the mine. And her eyes, she could feel them burning with silver light, the light of the moon itself. The silver that had been poisoning her blood was gone, burned away by the transformation, purged by the ancient magic that flowed through her veins. She was alive. She was free. She was mate. The call crashed through her mind, desperate and wild and absolutely overwhelming. She felt him before she saw him, felt the bond exploding between them with enough force to bring the mountain down. Alara ran. She tore through the tunnels, following the pull in her chest, leaping over bodies and debris and the crumbling remains of ancient supports. The air grew cleaner as she climbed toward the surface, the silver taste fading, the moonlight growing brighter. She burst out of the mine entrance just as a massive black wolf crashed through the army surrounding it. Coil. He was covered in blood, his fur matted with it, his golden eyes blazing with feral madness. He had fought through 100 wolves to reach her. He had torn his way through an army. And when he saw her, when his eyes locked onto her white form standing in the mouth of the mine, the madness stopped. The world stopped. Black and white, shadow and moonlight, king and queen. The mate bond exploded between them with a force that brought every wolf for miles to their knees. Power older than the Blackwoods, older than the Silver Crest, older than any living memory rolled through the mountains like thunder. And somewhere in the distance, 1,000 wolves lifted their heads and howled in recognition. The Moonborn have returned. The white wolf lives. "No!" Seraphina's scream cut through the night. She was on her feet, her silver hair wild around her face, her ice blue eyes wide with fury and disbelief. "This isn't possible. The Moonborn are dead. I killed them myself." She threw out her hand, pointing at the wolves around her. "Don't just stand there. This changes nothing." The Silvercrest wolves hesitated, looking between their alpha's daughter and the 2 wolves standing in the moonlight, the rightful king and the lost queen, reunited at last. Seraphina's voice rose to a shriek. "Kill them both!" Chapter 5. The Silvercrest wolves attacked as one. They came from all directions, a tide of fur and fang and killing intent, their eyes gleaming in the moonlight. 100 wolves against 2, impossible odds, a death sentence. But Alara had already died once tonight. She wasn't afraid of death anymore. She moved without thinking, her white wolf's body responding to instincts she'd never known she possessed. She ducked under the first attacker's lunge and tore out his throat before he could land. She spun away from a second, her claws raking across his flank, and felt Kyle's massive black form brush against her side as he took down 2 more. They fought like they'd been doing it their whole lives, like their wolves had run together through 1,000 battles, 1,000 years, moving in perfect synchrony without needing to speak or signal. Where she was fast, he was powerful. Where he was brutal, she was precise. They covered each other's weaknesses and amplified each other's strengths, and the Silvercrest wolves fell before them like wheat before a scythe. But there were so many of them, and the silver was everywhere. Alara could feel it in the air, seeping into her lungs with every breath. Her transformation had burned away the worst of the poison, but she was still weak, still recovering, and every minute she spent fighting in this tainted place was another minute closer to collapse. Kyle was faring worse. He had run 300 miles to reach her. He had fought through an army. His black fur was matted with blood, some of it his own now, and she could feel his exhaustion through the bond, a bone-deep weariness that threatened to drag him down. "We can't win this," she realized. "There are too many. We're too weak." A wolf slammed into her from the side, sending her tumbling across the rocky ground. She scrambled to her feet just in time to see 3 more closing in. Their lips peeled back from their fangs. Then a gray blur shot past her and took one of them down. Thorn, the half-feral Omega from the mines, his emaciated body somehow still moving, his eyes burning with a light that had nothing to do with madness and everything to do with purpose. He fought like a creature possessed, all teeth and claws and desperate fury, and he wasn't alone. More wolves poured out of the mine entrance. The prisoners, dozens of them, weak and silver-poisoned and barely able to stand, throwing themselves into the battle with nothing left to lose. They weren't soldiers. They weren't trained. Most of them could barely walk, but they fought anyway, for her. Alara felt it through some new sense she didn't understand, some connection that her moon-born blood had forged with every wolf in these mountains. They weren't fighting because they thought they could win. They were fighting because she had given them something they'd lost in the darkness of the mines. Hope. The tide began to turn, slowly at first, then faster as the Silvercrest wolves realized they weren't facing 2 enemies anymore. They were facing an army of the desperate, the forgotten, the abandoned, and desperation made wolves dangerous. Alara pressed forward, her white fur now stained red, her muscles screaming with exhaustion. She could see Serafina through the chaos, the silver-haired woman standing apart from the battle, her ice-blue eyes fixed on Alara with hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. Their eyes met, and Serafina smiled. She moved faster than Alara could track, faster than any wolf should have been able to move. One moment she was 20 feet away. The next, her hand was fisted in Alara's scruff, yanking her backward, and something cold and sharp was pressing against her throat. Silver. The dagger burned where it touched her skin, sending agony lancing through her body. Alara tried to shift, tried to pull away, but Serafina's grip was iron. "Don't move!" The battle froze. Every wolf, Silvercrest and prisoner alike, turned to look. Kale's massive black form stood 10 feet away, his golden eyes fixed on the blade at Alara's throat, his whole body vibrating with barely contained violence. "One more step," Serafina said pleasantly, "and I open her throat. Silver blade. She'll be dead before she hits the ground." Kale's wolf snarled, a sound that shook the very stones beneath their feet, but he didn't move. Kale. Alara reached for him through the bond. Don't surrender." "The kingdom? I don't care about the kingdom." His mental voice was raw, desperate. "I don't care about anything but you. I can't lose you. I won't. You have to shift." Serafina's voice cut through her thoughts. "Both of you. Now. I want to see your human faces when I explain exactly how thoroughly I've destroyed you." Kale shifted first, his black wolf melting away to reveal the man beneath, naked, bloody, his golden eyes still blazing with feral light. Alara followed, her white fur dissolving, her human body emerging weak and shaking and painfully vulnerable. The silver blade stayed at her throat. "That's better." Serafina circled around to face them both, keeping Alara between herself and Kyle like a shield. The mighty Alpha King, brought to his knees by a peasant girl. How romantic. How pathetic. Let her go. Kale's voice was barely human. This is between us, Serafina. She has nothing to do with your quarrel with me. Serafina laughed, high and cold. Oh, but she has everything to do with it. Don't you understand yet? This was never just about you, Kale. This was never just about killing one inconvenient king. She leaned closer, her lips brushing Alara's ear. My family has been planning this coup for decades. 3 generations of Silvercrest wolves, working in secret, building alliances, eliminating threats. We were so close to finally taking what should have been ours. The throne, Kale growled. The throne, the kingdom. Everything the Blackwoods stole from us a century ago when they slaughtered the Moonborn and claimed power for themselves. Serafina's grip tightened on Alara's hair. Did you think it was coincidence that the original royal line was wiped out? Did you think it was some natural political upheaval? Your ancestors killed them, Kale. Every last one. Women, children, babies in their cradles, all so the Blackwoods could rule. Alara felt the words land like physical blows. The Blackwoods had killed the Moonborn. Kale's family had murdered hers. But when she looked at him, at the horror in his golden eyes, the guilt and shame and devastation, she knew he hadn't known. He was as much a victim of those ancient crimes as she was. We were going to finish the job, Serafina continued. Kill you, take the throne, ensure the Blackwood line ended forever. Simple, clean, elegant. Her voice turned bitter. And then this creature appeared. This peasant girl with moon-born blood somehow running through her veins, hidden away in some backwater village where no one thought to look. How did you know? Alara's voice was hoarse, her throat burning where the silver touched it. How did you find out what I was? Palace records, birth certificates, bloodline traces that your mother tried to hide before she died. Serafina's smile was cruel. Oh yes, I know who your mother was. Elena Moonborn, the last princess of the White Wolves. She escaped the purge as an infant, hidden away by loyal servants, raised in obscurity. She fell in love with a common farmer. She had you, and then she died, and you were left alone, and everyone forgot that the Moonborn had ever existed. Alara's vision blurred with tears. Her mother, she had never known her mother's name, never known anything about where she came from or why she had been abandoned. But I didn't forget. Serafina pressed the blade harder against Alara's throat. I've spent years tracking down every whisper of Moonborn blood, eliminating any threat to our plans. When I found you, when I realized the Alpha King's fated mate was the last heir of the very bloodline we'd tried to destroy, I knew you had to die. Then why didn't you kill me in the palace? Alara asked. Why send me to the mines? Because I wanted you to suffer. Because I wanted you to die slowly in agony, knowing that no one was coming to save you. Serafina's eyes glittered with madness. The Moonborn were weak. That's why they fell. And you'll fall too, peasant queen. You'll die in the dirt like the nothing you are. Kyle took a step forward. Don't. Serafina angled the blade. I'll do it. You know I will. He stopped. His hands clenched at his sides, his whole body shaking with the effort of holding himself back. Alara could feel his agony through the bond, the impossible choice between attacking and risking her death, or surrendering and watching his kingdom fall. She wouldn't let him make that choice. I love you, she sent through the bond. Whatever happens next, I need you to know that. I love you. Alara, don't. She closed her eyes. The power had been there all along, she realized, sleeping inside her, waiting for her to claim it. The gift of the Moonborn, the ability to command any wolf, to force submission from even the strongest alpha, her mother's legacy, her birthright. Alara opened her eyes. They blazed silver, bright as the moon itself, bright as 1,000 stars compressed into 2 points of light. Power rolled off her in waves, ancient and terrible and absolutely undeniable. Kneel. The word wasn't spoken, it was commanded. It bypassed ears and minds and went straight to the wolf inside every creature present, grabbing hold of something primal and forcing it down. Every wolf in the mine dropped to their knees, the Silvercrest attackers, the rescued prisoners. Coil himself, his golden eyes wide with shock as his body betrayed him, and Seraphina, the silver-haired woman, hit the ground hard, the dagger falling from her fingers, her face contorted with fury and disbelief. "No, this isn't— I won't— submit." Seraphina's head bowed against her will, her whole body pressing flat against the earth in the most complete gesture of surrender a wolf could make. Alara stood over her, silver light still pouring from her eyes. Her naked body covered in blood and dirt and scars. She didn't look like a queen. She didn't feel like a queen. But in that moment, she was the most powerful creature in the realm. "The Moonborn weren't weak," she said softly. "We were merciful. We ruled with compassion instead of cruelty, and you mistook kindness for vulnerability." She knelt down, bringing her face close to Seraphina's. "That was your mistake." The command released. Wolves staggered to their feet all around them, gasping, shaking, staring at Alara with expressions ranging from terror to awe. Kale reached her in 3 strides. His hands cupped her face, his golden eyes searching hers, his whole body trembling. "You—" his voice broke. "You could have commanded me to attack. You could have used that power to—" "I know." Alara's silver eyes faded back to their normal gray. "But I didn't want you to kill for me. I wanted to save you for once." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tender. It was desperate and hungry and full of 3 months of longing, of fear, of need so intense it bordered on madness. His arms wrapped around her, crushing her against his chest like he was trying to absorb her into his very being. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for breath, the battle was over. The Silvercrest wolves had surrendered. Thorn and the other prisoners were binding them with the same silver chains they'd once worn themselves. And Seraphina was being dragged away, screaming curses and threats that no one was listening to anymore. "The traitor has been identified," Kale announced, his voice carrying across the mountainside. "Lady Seraphina Silvercrest conspired to assassinate your king and usurp the throne. Her family's lands are forfeit, their titles are stripped, their name is erased from the noble records forever." A ragged cheer went up from the wolves around them, but Kale wasn't finished. He turned to Alara and the whole world seemed to hold its breath. 3 months ago," he said quietly, "I was dying in the snow, poisoned, broken, alone. I had given up. I was ready to let the darkness take me." His hand came up to cup her cheek, and then an angel appeared, a girl with nothing to her name, no power, no protection, no reason to help a stranger, and she gave me her last piece of bread. Alara's eyes filled with tears. "You saved my life that night, Alara, not because you knew who I was, not because you wanted anything from me. You saved me because your heart is pure and good and braver than any warrior I've ever known." He pulled her closer. "I've been waiting to do this since the moment I opened my eyes and saw your face." He tilted her head back, and he marked her. His teeth sank into the junction of her neck and shoulder, and the mate bond exploded between them with a force that brought every wolf for miles to their knees. Power surged through Alara's veins, not just her own power now, but his too, the 2 of them merging into something greater than either could be alone. When he pulled back, there was blood on his lips and triumph in his eyes. "Mine," he growled. "Yours," she whispered back. "Always." 1 month later, the Black Moon Palace had never seen a celebration like this. Every noble house in the realm had sent representatives. Every pack had contributed to the feast. The great hall was draped in white and black, moonlight and shadow, the colors of two bloodlines finally united after a century of tragedy and lies. Alara stood at the end of the aisle in a gown of white silk, her dark hair crowned with silver and diamonds. The crown had been her mother's, recovered from a vault where the Blackwoods had hidden the treasures of the wolves they'd destroyed. Wearing it felt like carrying her mother's spirit with her, like Elena Moonborn was finally seeing her daughter take her rightful place. The wolves didn't just bow as she walked past them, they howled. The sound rose to the rafters, a chorus of voices raised in recognition and celebration, not for a peasant girl who had risen above her station, for a queen, a moon-born queen, the last of her line, stepping into a legacy that had been stolen from her before she was born. Cale waited for her at the altar, resplendent in black leather and iron thorns, his golden eyes soft with an emotion she had never expected to see from the fearsome Alpha King. Love. He loved her. She could feel it through the bond, warm and steady and absolutely certain. Not because she was beautiful, not because she was powerful, because she had given him bread when she had nothing, and that simple act of kindness had changed everything. She took his hand. "My people," Cale announced, his voice carrying through the hall, "I present to you Alara Moonborn Blackwood, your Luna, your queen, my mate." The howling intensified, a sound so pure and powerful that it shook the very stones of the palace. And in the front row, faces pale with humiliation, stood Baron Thornwood and his son Marcus. They had been stripped of their lands and titles. They had been dragged to the capital in chains. They had been forced to kneel at Alara's feet and beg for mercy. Mercy she had granted because she was Moonborn, and the Moonborn did not rule through cruelty. But they had been required to attend the coronation, required to watch the girl they had starved and beaten and planned to sell into slavery become the most powerful woman in the realm. Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. Baron Thornwood was weeping. Alara felt no satisfaction in their suffering, no triumph in their fall. She felt only a quiet peace, a certainty that the cycle of cruelty ended here, with her, in this moment. She would be a different kind of queen, a better kind. Cale's hand tightened on hers. "You're thinking too loud," he sent through the bond. "This is supposed to be a celebration." "I know." She smiled up at him. "I'm happy. I promise. You'd better be. I went through a lot of trouble to get you here." "You went through trouble?" "I was poisoned, kidnapped, and nearly murdered. Multiple times. Details." His mental voice was warm with amusement. "The point is, we're here now, together, and I'm never letting you go." "Good." She leaned into his side. "Because I'm never letting you go either." The ceremony continued. Vows were exchanged, blessings were given, and when Cale kissed her in front of the assembled wolves, the howling rose to a crescendo that could be heard for miles in every direction. The Black Moon Kingdom had a Luna again, a true queen, a moon-born wolf who would stand beside her king and rule with compassion and strength and the kind of love that fairy tales were made of. It was perfect. It was everything Alara had never dared to dream. And then she saw him, a figure in the back of the hall, hooded and cloaked, slipping toward the door. He paused for just a moment, turning to look at her, and the torchlight caught the emblem on his chest. A wolf, pierced through the heart with a silver arrow, the Wolf Slayers. The order had been extinct for 200 years. Hunters who had dedicated themselves to eradicating werewolf kind, who had killed thousands before the packs had finally united to destroy them. But this man was wearing their symbol. This man was watching her coronation. This man was gone. By the time Alara blinked, the figure had vanished into the crowd. She opened her mouth to say something to Cale, then stopped. This was their wedding day, their moment of triumph. She wouldn't ruin it with shadows and fears. But as she turned back to her mate, to her king, to the wolves who howled her name with joy and hope and loyalty, a cold certainty settled in her chest. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like, and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily, and also to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.